Well, good evening, folks, and welcome once again to the Joel Saint Show, sponsored by the Future of Christendom. Great to be back with you. I've been fighting a nasty flu, and I'm still not over it yet. It sends me into coughing fits from time to time. Hopefully that will not happen while we are with you tonight. I'm coming to you the day after the federal election, the national election. And, of course, there were plenty of Senate seats up for grabs, and, of course, every congressional seat also up for grabs as well. I want to bring 7 takeaways to you, things that I believe not a lot of other folks are talking about, and that's the reason for me coming to you at this point. 7 takeaways from the recent national election. Takeaway number 1, watch out for lawfare of a different kind. It looks too quiet out there. Why did it take K-Mal so long to concede? She could have conceded when it was clear that she didn't have the votes to win. Just concede. Get it over with. Instead, she has to come out the next day to adoring fans and an adoring crowd. I tell you what, I don't doubt at all. Between the time that it was obvious that she lost and the time that she conceded, you can be sure that her people, whoever they are, were considering all kinds of various measures to take this election away from Trump. There's no doubt about that. And I don't think they're finished. I don't like how quietly they all seem to have gone into the night here. So let's keep an eye out on this. I think we may have lawfare coming of a different kind. I mean, it's not too hard to believe that the lawfare is possible. We've already seen that again and again. So why quit now? And you know, we're not hearing all about how fair this election was, like we heard about. Remember with Biden and Trump, we heard from the left, from the mainstream media, oh, this has been such a fair election. Oh, this has been such a secure election. There was a dude I ran into at the county commissioner meeting here in Lancaster, and was telling me that 2020 was the most secure election ever. Remember, I mean, that was the talking point. Most secure election ever. So I asked him, I said, so if this was the most secure election ever, what about the previous ones? Apparently they were insecure. What was wrong with them? And what do we know about how to fix them? Well, he didn't want to talk about it. He just kind of gave me a dirty look and moved on. What kind of a foolish statement is that? 2020 was the most secure election ever. I don't think we're going to hear about that about 2024, most secure election ever. That's point number 1. Watch out for lawfare of a different kind. Point 2, it is a disgrace that this was even as close as it was. This disaster of a Democratic candidate who couldn't tell us anything about what she wanted to do except hand out free stuff like it was a candy store. $25,000 for first-time home buyers. You know what it just did? You just raised the price of housing by even considering something like that. And you know she's a fraud anyway, because if that was such a great idea, why didn't she do that when she was vice president? You know, Kamala get together with Joe and start handing out money like it's candy. What a complete disgrace she is, and her other ideas as well. We're going to go after price gougers. Do you know anything about how difficult it is to get food into the store? All the things that have to go right. The trucking, the manufacturing, the packaging. And then when it gets to the store, you have to have the right people to display it, which is not an easy thing. I spent time in the food industry, in the retail food industry. It's not an easy thing to do. Your freezers take a lot of maintenance. Your freezers can go down for her to say that there's price gouging going on in the food business at the retail level anyway, is a complete disgrace. And it's a disgrace that this was even as close as it was. She shouldn't have gotten more than 5 votes. But she gets the votes because she was able to appeal to our covetous nature. Hey, those other people are getting rich off of us. They owe us. That is a classic communist comment, a classic communist come on, and to call her Kamala is quite accurate. What a disgraceful platform. We're going to get the price gougers. She didn't say any of them, who any of them were. She didn't name a single one. And we're going to hand out money for first-time home buyers. Vote for us. Terrible. Disgraceful candidate. Disgraceful. Number 3, will voting fix our country? Are we in bad shape in this country because we haven't had good candidates? Or do we not have good candidates for another reason? Let me ask this question. This is for people who name the name of Christ. Does any Christian believe that any solution short of submission to Christ and his law will work? Does any Christian believe that any solution short of submission to Christ and his law will help us to recover from the malaise, from the difficulty, from the horror that our nation has become? Anything less than that? Do we think that if we just start voting for good candidates that we'll get out of it? No, my friends. Throughout history, we are covenantal people. If we obey Christ and love his law, we get blessing. The West has been blessed. The West has been a Christian West, best way to say that. Other countries have not. For example, let's take the Soviet Union, for example. You know, Stalin, Lenin, all those guys, they bulldozed churches. They sent Christians off to the gulag, murdered them, took their land, took their property. Is it any wonder that the Soviets didn't produce anything except misery and bloodshed? I mean, 77 years, or however much it was, 70 years of Bolshevik rule in Russia and in the Ukraine, which used to be extremely productive, by the way. What have they actually done? Have they given us a single invention? 70 years and nothing. Why? They are not submissive to Christ and his law. I'll talk a little bit later about production and what that has to do with the Bible and the Ten Commandments. We'll get to that in a moment. So, watch out for lawfare of a different kind. It is a disgrace that this was even as close as it was. And asking the question, will voting fix our country? My friends, we can have an awful lot of voting for Donald Trump or whoever. But can we survive while we flaunt the law word of God? The answer has to be no. Can't happen. I'll tell you one other thing about that too that's related. I watched WorldNet Daily, not a bad show, during the election evening. And I was a little disappointed. I mean, they were talking about the problems in America. They're really excited about Trump presidency. I didn't hear a single thing about government schooling. Do we understand that as long as J. Gresham Machen said, as long as we give the bureaucrats our children, we might as well give them everything else because they're going to get it anyway. Do we understand that we can vote for Trump again and again and again? Let's say he cloned himself and he ran every election cycle. You know, if we keep giving the children away, the next generation is going to be worse. It is time to call for the separation of school and state. Why has it taken us this long? Do we really think that if we keep giving our children away to the bureaucrats, to the wicked people who hate Christ, hate his law, hate his authority, do we think that we're going to make any progress at all? Not at all. If the pagans have our children, then our children will grow up to be pagan. And we'll be fighting again. But why are we fighting so hard and still giving our children away to statists who hate Christ, hate his law? We know, number 4, we know that the deep state has been running things pretty much all of the Biden presidency. Will the deep state now simply just fold up their tents and move off the property? I mean, come on. Everybody knows that Biden has been running anything. It was kind of funny. I saw some video of him. You see Harris, you see Trump. They're moving around. They're campaigning, right? Then you see some video of Biden. You know, he's like staring ahead like this. Looks like they just kind of moved him out. of the aging home in order to make an appearance. He hasn't been running much of anything, but the deep state has been. Somebody's been running things. Will a Trump presidency just chase them all off and they move away? That's a question we must ask ourselves. Number 5, it now appears as if Kamau received, get this, approximately 14, this is reported at Zero Hedge, approximately 14 million votes less than Biden. How can that be, as Biden never even campaigned? And everybody argues, oh yeah, 2020 was so secure. There's no evidence of cheating. I want to know how a guy who could barely get out of his basement in 2020 when he so-called campaigned got 14 million more votes, approximately, than Kamala Harris did, than Kamau Harris. I want to know how that possibly happened, because I don't think that it did. There is just no possible. Say what you want about Kamau. At least she campaigned. She did campaign. Now, maybe it wasn't the greatest campaign, and we all know that her word salads would not have worked in a Joe Rogan interview. Might have worked for the first half hour, but that is 2 or 3 hour interviews. It wouldn't have worked. But she did campaign. Remember Biden? I mean, he hardly got out of the basement. And then when he did, remember him like talking to just a few people, and they all had this nice big like white circle around them so they wouldn't spread COVID. Oh, it was so disgusting. It was like I'm Joe Biden and I'm compliant. The only thing that reminded me of is half our pastors that couldn't wait to tell the state how compliant they were too. Disgusting. Anyway, the man didn't campaign, but somehow he got 14 million more votes than Kamau. I'll never run for president, but if I do, I think I know how to win. Just don't campaign. And then I'll get 14 million more votes than my opponent who did campaign. Come on, everybody stop. We know that there was all kinds of corruption that went on. Otherwise, where do 14 million more votes come from for a guy who couldn't even get out of the basement? Stop it. There was all kinds of horrible malfeasance that went on. Number 6, excuse me. I have to say this. This recent election has the same feeling for me as the Reagan victory over Jimmy Carter in 1980. Let me explain. My wife and I were married in October of 1980, October the 25th, which was a great day for me. Trust me, wonderful day. And shortly after that, the race, 1980, was decided between Reagan and Carter, beginning of November. So you can imagine we were just married in October, and then a few weeks later, we're there in a hotel in Washington, D.C. It was a Republican gathering. Basically, it was the D.C. Republican gathering victory party for Reagan over Carter. And they always call them victory parties even before. Both sides call them victory parties. Anyway, it was so exciting. It was exciting to see Reagan just crushing it. He won state after state after state. And I was excited, young guy. Man, we're going to roll this left-wing nonsense back. Well, 8 years after Reagan, and Reagan might have bought us some time, but there's some things that Reagan did, especially as far as vaccines are concerned, that were not good at all. And the fact of the matter is, we didn't roll anything back. The only thing that might have happened is maybe we would have slowed down the rush to destruction. And I got to tell you, this has the same feeling for me as well. What's going to happen during the next 4 years of Trump that actually rolls back the tyranny of the state that reaches into every area of our lives? How are we going to have more freedom? I got to tell you, the only way we have more freedom, the only way we have more liberty, is to embrace God's law. Is that not what's on our Liberty Bell? Our Liberty Bell says, proclaim liberty throughout the land. That is from the book of Leviticus, if you can imagine that. In other words, on our Liberty Bell, there is a reference to God's law word and a knowledge that you're not going to have liberty without the law word of God. Everything else is going to end up in tyranny. Ask the recipients of Mao's China and Stalin's Russia if you don't believe me. Oh, yeah, both Mao and Stalin, they were great talkers about, what was the word? Oh, Stalin had this all the time. Liberate. Yeah. We're going to liberate this nation and that nation. Yes, liberate the people. Liberate meant bringing them into bondage. How can I be so sure that the law word of God takes you out of bondage and into freedom? You know, the first commandment says, it starts out, I am the Lord your God that brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. In other words, you want freedom? Obey Christ. Embrace the true God. Reject all the other fake gods. You want bondage? Reject the true God and embrace the fakes. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. Number 7, production has made the USA in particular and the West in general materially great. Let me ask you something. Why are some places more productive than others? Don't tell me it's simply natural resources. There's no such animal as a natural. Listen, there's no such thing as a natural resource without a person somewhere in a free society to harness that natural resource and make it productive for one's neighbor. Prior to the production and the use, if you will, of oil was a problem. It seeped up from the ground. It ruined fields. It ruined pastures. But somebody came along and made it productive. That happened also, for example, in Hong Kong. Hong Kong really wasn't that much. A lot of rocks. And yet people came along, made it a trading zone, and it became productive. There's no such animal as a natural resource without someone to make it productive. Why has the West been so productive? Why? There's plenty of nations in the world that have all kinds of resources. Venezuela, lots and lot of oil, completely. It's a mess down there. How about Saudi Arabia, which still, to my knowledge, doesn't seem to have a middle class? You have the real wealthy people that are connected with oil, and the real poor people that aren't, and not much of a middle class going on down there. Why is this? It's because of the 10 Commandments. Particularly, don't ever forget the 10th commandment. Do not covet your neighbor's house, your neighbor's wife, your neighbor's servants, your neighbor's farm animals, or anything that is your neighbor's. Communism is built on covetousness. Karl Marx's idea was that if my neighbor has more than me, if I have a productive neighbor, he must have stolen it from me. So go do the right thing, kill him, and take his stuff. Well, if that's your philosophy, kill someone who has more than you and take his stuff. Trust me, you're going to be poor, as all communist countries are, dirt poor. But we have all this production in the West, and it's because of the 10 Commandments, which deal extensively. Do not kill. Do not take your neighbor, covet your neighbor's stuff. Do not bear false witness against your neighbor. Oftentimes in the court of law, that's why we bear false witness, is because we want our neighbor's stuff. No, the West has seen tremendous production because the scriptures defend production. In other words, a person who produces and is able to serve his neighbor gets rewarded for doing just that, as it should be. And it doesn't matter if he has 1,000 times more money than his neighbor. Let his neighbor get to work. Let his neighbor do what he can with what he has. Everybody stop whining. And can we celebrate our neighbor who does well? Can we celebrate our neighbor who is really good at business? A businessman is simply someone who is good at serving his neighbor. An honest businessman, that's what it's. Can we not be thankful for them? Can we not be thankful for all the stores and all the people who work so hard so that we have choices? Oh no. Let's be communists about it. Let's see if we can hate them like K-Mal. We're going to make the rich pay their fair share. That is not a godly or a biblical idea at all. Pay their fair. Who knows what that is? That's just an appeal to grift, to jealousy, to envy, and to covetousness. And it has no place in a productive land. It has no place in a Christian country. Well, thanks for being with me here tonight. This took me a little bit longer than I thought. Thankfully, beginning to maybe win against this ghastly, whatever it is I have, flu, whatever. 7 points. Watch out for lawfare of a different kind. 2, it's a disgrace that this was even as close as it was. It's a disgrace. 3, asking a question, will voting fix our country? Will it? Does any Christian believe that any solution short of submission to Christ and his law is what we need? Can we get back to making America great again? Short or outside of Christ and his law? Is there another path here? Obviously not. Number 4, we know that the deep state has been running things pretty much all the time of the Biden presidency. Will the deep state now simply just fold up their tents and move off the property? I don't think so. That's a question we need to ask. Number 5, it now appears that K-Mal received approximately 14 million more votes than Joe Biden. K-Mal who campaigned, Biden who didn't. How can that be, as Biden never even campaigned? Let's stop. Let's get out of denial here. There's all kinds of shenanigans that went on in 2020. Number 6, this has the same feeling to me as the Reagan victory over Jimmy Carter in 1980. We need to ask ourselves, how can we roll back the tide of tyranny that we're under? Number 7, production has made the USA in particular and the West in general materially great. That's because of Christ and his law word. All right. Well, thank you again. Hope you like, and I hope you subscribe. Again, this has been the Joel Saint Show, sponsored by the Future of Christendom. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope to be back with you very, very soon. Also want to thank all of you who attended our recent conference, the Future of Christendom Conference, Christ is King. There's a lot of wonderful videos online that you can go look and see, and hope you enjoy them. And stay tuned. We'll have some announcements shortly about our conference coming up next year. Again, thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.